April is a big month for the Conscious Habit podcast. It marks our 2-year anniversary from launching this show in 2022. First off, thank you. Thank you for being along for the ride. Thank you for your feedback, your suggestions on the topics, and the guests that you would like to hear on the podcast. And as an additional thank you, we are rerunning one of our fans' favorite shows. It happens to be one of mine as well. It is with New York Times bestselling author Cy Wakeman. Take a listen.
Happiness is not something you defer. It is found in the way you move through your daily activities. Meditating, I never feel mad. I always feel happier. Reading poetry, I never end up feeling worse. I always feel better. Do things that help you feel better. It's that simple.
You just heard from Cy Wakeman, New York Times bestselling author, leadership consultant, drama researcher, and overall badass. This is part 2 of our conversation, and in this episode, we break down one of my all-time favorite Cy books, No Ego. Listen as she explains why grabbing the keys to your BMW, bitching, moaning, and whining, is so counterproductive, and we'll shed light on the tactics you can employ to break ego's grip on you. We wrap our talk by getting a glimpse into a day in the life of Cy and learn what books and authors she holds most sacred. But before we get to that, let's give that ego the attention it craves. So, Cy, where I first really became familiar with you in your work was in the drama-based stuff that you were doing. So No Ego in particular. I remember a client of mine putting this in front of us saying, have you heard of Cy Wakeman? And have you read her stuff? And I'm like, no. But as soon as I started reading it and saw, first of all, Cartman's Drama Triangle, oh, I could just talk. I love. And I was going, yes. And in particular, everybody, my clients listening to this know, because they've heard me say this a million times, one of my favorite phrases from Cy is about driving our BMWs. And Cy, can you just tell the peeps who are not in the know what BMW stands for?
Bitching, moaning, and whining. And when we get in the ego and toggle down, we tend to disengage and it doesn't feel good. So the way we self-soothe is BMW driving, bitching, moaning, and whining.
People disguise it as, I just need to vent. And one of the quotes from the No Ego book, so another book, in our first episode, I really talked a ton about Life's Messy, Live Happy, for sure. Read that book. The No Ego book is a great reference book if you are a leader and you are working with humans with a heartbeat. Chances are you're going to be navigating drama. And so one of the quotes in the book is, venting is the ego's way of avoiding self-reflection. So it feels so easy to grab the keys and jump in our BMW. What's the better way to shift into? How do we turn it off and shift into self-reflection?
Venting, it avoids self-reflection. Self-reflection is the foundation of accountability, which is death of the ego, which is ownership, which is owning your ship. So a lot of people believe that venting and feeling are the same things. And venting is a behavior. It is not a feeling. A feeling is a feeling. Venting is the story we make up to justify or fuel the feeling or keep it alive. And a lot of people are like, I just need time to vent. And I'm like, actually you don't. It feels good. But so does other unproductive behavior like snorting cocaine. And people don't really understand the difference between venting and feeling. Venting usually is intellectualized feelings. It's usually justified feelings. A lot of what we're venting about, if you inquire, never even happened. It's the ego's distorted view. A lot of our feelings and our disgruntlement is that the ego is viewing our world. The ego needs to stay disgruntled to stay alive. It has to stay angry. And so a lot of people believe they're sympathizing and helping employees when they let them vent. And what I like to have people do is empathize with their feelings, but don't hold space for their feelings, but don't validate the sense they make of their experience. That's where questioning can set them free.
In ego, that's one of my favorite things to talk about because I do believe some of the greatest inner work we can do is understanding the difference between when ego takes hold, and ego is meant to protect us, right? And so it serves a purpose, but if it's driving it, I kind of have been thinking of ego like the minions making a mess, like, oh, let me just run out. Oh. And if we are standing in ego and we're telling our story in ego and we're driving our BMW, we're navigating drama in ego, what are some of the ways, what might we hear, see, feel that would say, this is ego and not necessarily reality?
And what I like to say, and I'm glad you said that ego is positive, if you look at internal family systems, it's all about accepting all parts of you. And some of our protectors, some of our managers, those parts of us, that's ego and kind of run amiss. And it's not to reject it, it's to notice it and love it. But if you imagine you have that toggle switch on your forehead, an invisible light switch, when you're toggled down, you'll be seeing the world through the lens of ego, and ego distorts your view. It's like wearing a pair of prescription glasses that are the wrong prescription. And what ego does is it takes reality and adds judgment, assignment of motive, assumptions, biases, story to it. And so the difference is, let's say that I'm driving to work and someone seems to appear male, driving a pickup truck, enters my lane of traffic in front of me, leaving me less room than I preferred. So that's all that happened. That's the facts. If you're a reality base, you would just say, oh, what would be a good choice? I would slow down because I prefer more room. You would just make good choices and your commute would be really peaceful. What the ego does is it takes that reality and adds story. Obviously, a male chauvinist pig driving a pickup. He doesn't respect women drivers. He doesn't respect life. He thinks he owns the road. He look at his bumper stickers. Obviously, I know his political persuasion, and that's what the ego sounds like. I know they are. It's all divisive. It's judgy. It's exaggerated. And then what happens is when I'm believing that as my truth, I make horrible choices. I want safety, so what do? Speed up. I'm not letting him in. Who does he think he is? And all of a sudden, my commute, which could be joy or misery, same commute, is super stressful. But the stress didn't come from what happens on the road. It came from my story I made up about what happened on the road. So this happens a lot. I just had Alex come in, one of my team members. He's like, I'm so frustrated. I'm like, thank you for sharing your feelings. You look frustrated. I'll validate that you seem frustrated. Feelings take about a minute to share. The rest, he goes, because Sarah does this crap on purpose and didn't give me the information I needed. Now I'm going to be late to my son's ball game. All of that is story. If you don't want to suffer, the Dalai Lama says, step up and have impact or radically accept it. The third option, I just want to stay and vent about it, is self-imposed suffering. So I'm like, what can you do? I could put something on her calendar to remind her. Awesome, go be great. I shouldn't have to. You were almost great, but the ego brought a rule in. Can you give her grace, tolerance, and mercy? That feels good. No, she shouldn't get away with it. So you don't want to impact it. You don't want to accept it. You really just want to stay and vent about it. And that avoids self-reflection, avoids accountability. So when people say, I want time to vent, I go, I have a really more direct channel to happiness. It's called accountability. It starts with self-reflection, not with venting. Let's go there and then go have impact. And a lot of people don't realize how much of their suffering is self-imposed.
You're right. Preferences, right? I think Eckhart Tolle talks a lot about, and Michael Singer talks a lot about how like our frustration starts with preferences. Have you read Michael Singer stuff? Untethered Soul,
Yes, I love it.
Living Untethered. You're like, yes, sister. It's probably one of those on the nightstand.
And the difference with preferences is if you have some, speak them, but they have no agreement with you to live up to them. And so it's like, if we live with great expectancy that the world's amazing and there'll be plenty of surprises rather than expectations, we're good. But there's so many times the ego's like, they did this crap on purpose, like it's personalized, or this will end horribly, it's catastrophe, or they always, I never, here's the motive, the reason they do this is, here's how this will end, they're out to get me. Like it's all, if you really listen to it, and you wrote down your story and you went back and took out assignment of motive and judgment, and your story as it really happened just isn't all that painful. Our stress comes from our story, not our reality.
Our ability as leaders to navigate that is what really can help make us powerful. And, we're talking about burnout and stress and all of these things that are happening. Personally, in the executives I've been able to coach, what I see is that burnout is happening when we live from the ego and it's sort of like this expectation is there. And then, I am frustrated with the people around me. And you're right, it is ego loves to judge ourselves and others. I'm not good enough. They're not good enough. I'm better than, they're better than. And it makes a muck of things and it drives us crazy.
It ties things together that are ridiculous combinations, and we lead to burnout. I'll say, I work with healthcare. It's like, what's going on? We're all burnt out. Tell me about that. Well, we didn't have the equipment we needed, and that obviously means that management doesn't care. And so they're thinking, I'm working in a place where no one cares. Well, that's going to lead to burnout. And I say, what if those two aren't connected? What if you didn't have the equipment you needed and management did care? Would that change hope for the future that we could just work together to get you the equipment? And it changes everything. The ego assures our burnout because it makes everything unsolvable. It makes everything we're the victim and somebody else is the villain. It makes everything super complex, and it limits our view of the world so harshly that we can't see hope and we can't see options. And we think our outcomes are predetermined, and we lose our place of impact, our agency. And I think a lot of burnout is from our stories, not our reality.
And not knowing how to navigate and understand when we are on Cartman's drama triangle. So, three positions there, right? There's the rescuer, the persecutor, and the victim. Many of us, we cop on and on that baby a million times a day. I do. This is my journey to being a more conscious human, is how quickly can I catch that I've done it? It used to last years, and then it went to months and then days, and now it's then hours, and now hopefully it's minutes. I can't say it's always that good. Sometimes it's longer than that. But what advice do you give people on staying off the damn Cartman's drama triangle? Is it going through some of those exercises that you shared before? What's the best approach?
We have in No Ego, especially, we have tons of tools about how to edit your story, how to look at this means that and disconnect, how to use thinking inside the box. The power for me out of that triangle is when I started to understand that I was not one of them, because I would identify as the victim or the rescuer, but that in any moment, if I was one, I was all. It's all an ego. When I rescue, I do persecute. I leave people thinking they can't manage their own lives. And I am the victim because I'm surrounded by idiots. I have to do everything. So when I took that triangle and it just became what I call toggle down behavior, and I replaced it with compassion and curiosity and inquiry and openness and being willing to step into the mystery. When we are into the mastery, I know, and I know how to live life better, and we're automatically on that triangle, we're living it. When we step into the mystery, which is open mind, open heart, I don't know anything, and I'm here to help. And so there's three questions I really have people entertain and walk with that will change your life. And the first one is, what do I know for sure? That breaks up the ego's grip on your life, and you start to see that most of what I'm stressed about isn't even happening. And then that opens up our natural help. What can I do to help? A lot of times that is say nothing, do nothing, just stand and hold space and hug and love. And then if I were great, what would that look like? Not if this were great or other people were great, but if I were great, if I were my highest self right now, what would that look like? And that goes back to the Course of Miracles. Marianne Williamson's interpretation was like, basically, how can I love today? And so it's first, how can I see things clearly? Because she has, Course of Miracles is all about breaking the ego's grip on your life. And then her questions of how can I help is like, how do you want me to love today? And then what would great look like is actually moving through the world, keeping that commitment. And it's amazing what happens with those three questions that get you immediately off that triangle.
Oh, I love that. And the empowerment that people feel, that alone can help you lean into peace. Peace is not something that happens outside of you. It's a being, right? It's not a having, it's a being. And so it can allow you to lean into that being. My recommendation is any leaders who are on here, this No Ego book is an incredible read for leadership teams. Hand it to the people on your team. I think Life's Messy, Live Happy, give it to every friend and family member that you have, because both of them just give you so much insight on what do we do when things around us are falling apart. We can fall apart, or we can sort of use these methodologies, these practices to move through it. And the No Ego book has really great exercises in the back. It's a great reference book to move through. So, in our remaining time together, here's my like ask Sai moment here. I am really curious of personal practice. What does your morning look like?
My morning has dedications. They don't go in the same order, but they all get done in the morning. I get up, I'm a coffee fanatic, so I make a beautiful pour over coffee. I read Mark Nepo's book, The Book of Awakening. I read that daily. I meditate. A lot of times I do TM, but now I'm obsessed with the Waking Up app. And I'm a poetry reader. So if you looked at my coffee tables, I have David White, Mary Oliver, Rilke, Padraig O'Toole. So every day I start out reading poetry out loud to myself. And then I usually walk with a neighbor or by myself. If I walk by myself, I listen to a podcast. But I walk 3 miles in the morning with a neighbor. And then, of course, the shower, or sometimes I use my swimming pool as my shower. And then I jump into my workday. I work a lot, and then my nighttime routine, I light a candle to say work is over. I walk on the beach for sunset. I use that as more meditative time, and I read and go to bed.
I hope what people pick up here, because the amount of times I talk to folks and they're like busy professionals and they feel like it's an act of laziness to take time to, and I'm just like, can I just lovingly bitch smack you really quickly? Like, can I just like, it's an act of self love and preservation and love for others.
And when I am uncentered and I'm moving through life, and I'll notice it because I am using alcohol and I'm using Netflix, I am self soothing, but not self caring. Self caring is what replenishes and restores you. Self soothing is what numbs you to help you procrastinate or not look at the poor choices you're making in life. And I will say I don't have time, but when I am in a bad place and I get my screen time from Apple for the week, I had time. I used it scrolling Instagram or watching Netflix. So it is not about having time, it is how I use my time. And if I'm abandoning myself, I use my time for self soothing. If I'm claiming myself, I'm using my time for those dedications. And I would tell you, I ignore those dedications when I need to make some tough choices because it benefits me not to be clear. And then I can be the victim. And so I can tell you how I will feel on Sunday night based on what my habits and dedications have been. Happiness is not something you defer, it is found in the way you move through your daily activities. Meditating, I never feel mad, I always feel happier. Reading poetry, I never end up feeling worse, I always feel better. Do things that help you feel better. It's that simple.
Yes. I love how it's like, it's simple and it's easy, but we complicate things. Us humans just love to make things more complicated than they are. I know you mentioned that your whole headboard is books. Are there some that are the sacred, you're like, these will never leave my possession?
Those are my headboard. So I have tons of books I give away, and I have tons of books in my library, but my headboard's my sacred book. So if you looked at my headboard, Marianne Williamson, Return to Love, Course of Miracles, Eckhart Tolle, Osho. I have tons of poetry, as I've said. I love Alain de Botton, like his Book of Love and anything by the School of Life. Oh, Women Who Run with Wolves, I read every single year. It's the most amazing book. It's all about storytelling. And so much by Martha Beck and all the good ones. But mostly, a lot of people say, what business books do you read? I mostly read poetry.
Maybe we need a size book club.
That would be fun. I'm an avid reader.
I go through a lot of books and I feel better, right? It's like, okay, do I feel better when I binge watch a Netflix show or when I listen to Ram Dass? Which one makes me feel like a better human on the planet? Okay, probably Ram Dass.
Yeah, Richard Rohr. Like, what restores hope for me? Like, what I'm usually craving when I'm feeling tired, I'm in despair. What I'm craving is hope. And so, like, why not read that genre? And I read a ton of fiction too, because I like the break of it. Oh, anything Rumi, any interpretation of Rumi. So, yeah, we read all the same stuff, we folks, but Richard Rohr has some fire content out right now.
I'm going to have to check that out. Okay, lastly, last question. What can't you live without?
I don't know that there's anything I can not live without, but what I would be sad about, books is one thing. I like coffee. I would say water. I always find myself around water. I live on the ocean. I've lived on lakes. When I was homeless, I lived on a lake in a pup tent. I seriously was homeless and was fine because I was near water. So I think for me, it's visual, just the power of water in my visual field.
What a great source of healing for you. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, your insights, your vulnerability, your time. I'm so grateful.
Thank you, Amy. So glad we connected.
Before we wrap up this episode, here are my 3 takeaways from Sai and how we can live beyond the ego. Number 1, there's what actually happened, and then there's the story that's added on top of it. Whenever we're in the midst of challenges or frustration, we have to be careful not to allow our judgments to color the outcomes. So it's important to take a moment, take a step back so that you can see the situation more clearly and remember that reality is often subjective. Number 2, it's true that venting can feel so freaking good, but driving that BMW around actually gets us nowhere. And what we end up doing is self-imposing suffering that doesn't actually need to be there. And so it's a chance to take some self-accountability. The phrase I often use is own your 50, which is just a nicer way of saying own your shit, but basically take radical ownership over what you can control. And that's why I love Sai's work so much, because her passion is really an inspiration for my passion, which is teaching people to really radically dig in on what they're able to shift, which is how they think about things, how they feel about things, and how they respond to things. And lastly, Sai's simple concept of do what makes you feel better. Feed your mind, feed your soul, feed your consciousness, because y'all, we are stuck with us every minute of every day. We might as well really like how we think and feel. This was only half of my conversation with Sai. If you liked what you heard, I encourage you to go back and listen to part 1 of our discussion. In that episode, Sai shares so much vulnerability and insight into her newest book, Life's Messy, Live Happy. Thanks for listening to the Conscious Habit Podcast. If you dug this episode, we'd love it if you would subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. And if you're into this consciousness thing, if you like this conversation and you want to meet more like-minded people, head on over to Facebook and join the Conscious Habit community. Until next time, do the world a favor and go love yourself.